Several years ago, Harry Emerson Fosdick wrote a book called On Being a Real Person. I like to translate this title back into a more original form because what it says is on being a genuine fake. The word person is from the Latin persona, and that means something through which sound goes. And it referred originally to the mask worn by actors in the Greco-Roman theater, which was open air, and therefore instead of an electronic sound system, the mask had to be made with a megaphone-like mouth, which would carry the sound. And so at the beginning of a play, you see a list of characters called dramatis personae, the masks of the drama. In other words, the list of the masks that are going to be worn. Now, in a curious transformation of words, we have come to mean when we say a person. The word parson is related, incidentally, to the word person. The parson was the important person in the town. The person. And what was originally the surface has come to mean the reality. And this is perhaps in some way a measure of a loss or of a forgetting of what is our true identity. Common sense, reflected in common speech, reflects the fact that most people living today, both in the East and in the West, feel that they are strangers in the earth. To quote Houseman, I, a stranger and afraid, in a world I never made. We say, I came into this world. We say, you have to face reality. And if we believe in the mythology of 19th century science, we believe that we are rather chancy occurrences in an external world which, insofar as it is beyond outside human skins, is a perfectly stupid mechanism, largely composed of radioactive gas and rock, gyrating pointlessly and without the slightest concern for our ideas of rationality or for our human systems of value. We are freaks. And therefore, if this be so, our business is to engage in the futile and tragic task of beating this external stupid world into submission to our wills by all the technological forces available to us, knowing that in the end we are not going to succeed, that the task is too big, that it will eventually overwhelm us when the sun goes out, or when some comet knocks us out, or when indeed, through our own lack of control over our own emotional processes, we turn the planet Earth into a star by radioactivity. So this sense, you see, of our own existence is a sense of alienation, a sense of not really belonging in this world at all. I've been terribly interested in how people feel their own existence. I keep probing and questioning, what do you mean? Not only what do you mean, but what do you feel when you use the word I? And the general consensus of civilized people is that I means a center of conscious attention and voluntary action located halfway between the ears and a little way behind the eyes. This is not the same, what you mean by I is not for most people the same thing as the totality of one's physical organism. The organism is felt to be the property of I, or the vehicle of I, in somewhat the same way as an automobile is the vehicle for the driver. So we say, again, how common speech reflects our basic feelings. I have a body. We don't say I am a body. And although we say I think, I talk, I walk, I run, we don't say I beat my heart, I grow my hair, I color my eyes, I shape my bones. We feel a very, very vast gap between certain things that we do on the one hand and certain things that happen to us on the other. And most of us feel that our bodies happen to us. They were given to us by our parents. And so if you admire a particularly beautiful girl and say, gee, you are just so gorgeous, she's liable to say, oh, how like a man you are. All you think about is bodies. Now, I may be beautiful, but my body was given to me by my parents, and I want to be admired for myself and not for my chassis. And so she defines herself as a chauffeur. Disowning her organism. Now, I feel more and more that the central and disastrous problem of Western civilization and of all technical civilization is the confusion of symbol and reality. The mistaking of the word for the physical event which it represents, of money for wealth, of menu for dinner, of marriage for love, of law for order, and the person, the mask, for the living organism. Civilization very largely depends upon our skill in using symbols, whether they be words or whether they be numbers or other abstractions. By being able to wrap the earthly globe in a net of lines of latitude and longitude, we can navigate. But we must never for one moment suppose that we can ever wrap a parcel using the equator as a string. It's an imaginary line, and it works to the extent that we realize it is so. And so in the same way, all kinds of symbolic conceptions that we have about life are imaginary, in the same way as the lines of latitude and longitude. But because they are so useful for certain purposes and within certain limits, we become hypnotized by them and we mistake them for reality. Not so long ago, the Senate and Congress of the United States passed an act making it a criminal offense to burn the American flag, with lots of patriotic speeches about Old Glory. And those same representatives are directly responsible by acts of commission or omission for burning up that for which the flag stands, namely the continental geographical United States and the biological organisms living upon it, by failure to correct conservation of forests, to stop the pollution of water and air, and all the other depredations of the physical planet that are going on around us. Because we are a people so absorbed with symbols and with making money that we have no idea how to enjoy wealth. We are distinguished for our miserable cooking and for vastly rich tycoons who go around dressed like undertakers. And I've met one of the richest men in this country. I've never come across a more miserable person in his expression and in his terror of the awful things that might happen. Real paranoid. Why, but is he rich? Texas. So in the same way, we confuse our personalities with ourselves. Our mask, our role in life, with who we really are. We don't know who we really are. We think that we are these lonely little creatures that are born into this world, that are victims of a huge trap. We're not responsible for it. We even blame our parents and say, you got me into this mess. You know, when there's a juvenile delinquent, the courts get after it and they say, well, now, the poor boy couldn't help it. His parents were sort of mixed up. And then the press get after the parents and say, we shouldn't condemn the children, we should get after the parents who brought them up so badly. And the parents say, hey, well, now, wait a minute. What about our parents who brought us up so badly? And so they pass the buck. And it goes back and back to Adam and Eve. And you know what happened when God asked Adam, did you eat the fruit of the tree whereof I told thee thou shouldst not eat? And he said, this woman that thou gavest me, she tempted me, and I did eat. And then God looked at Eve, and he said, well, what about that, baby? And she said, the serpent beguiled me. And God looked at the serpent. The serpent said nothing. But the eye of God that wasn't looking at Eve winked at the serpent. The serpent didn't pass the buck. Because he knew who he was. But we always manage to play the game that we as individual people are just poor little victims of the system. We arrived in this world and we found that it was a huge trap that the adults had already arranged before us. And so the blame is passed back and back and back and back and back. And we don't realize that we're not the victims of the past any more than a wake drives the ship. The wake, which is the record of where the ship has been, that is to say, the record of its past, is created by the bow of the ship as it goes through the water. And so we, living in this present, create our past and trail it behind us. It doesn't move us any more than the tail wags the dog. And we have to accept this responsibility. But we can't accept it if we continue with the mythological notion that each one of us is just a person. That is to say, a mask. A John Doe, a Mary Smith, which is something that in other languages called the ego, and which is simply and only the center of our conscious attention and our superficial volition. If you think about yourself, you realize very quickly that you don't know how you manage to be conscious, and you don't know how you will. You know how to open and close your hand in the sense that you can do it, but you don't know how you do it in words unless you're a physiologist. And then you can't open and close your hand much better than anybody else. You don't know how you grow your brain upon which consciousness is based. You did it, but you've no idea how you did it. And the reason is this, that when you try to translate any organic process, such as growing a brain, into words, you say it's too complicated to put into words. So many things are going on. So many details are being attended to simultaneously. And with words, you can only talk about one thing at a time. And therefore it would take forever and ever and ever to describe, to think about what is being done by your own brain. And the world is only complicated because words are clumsy. It would be complicated to drink up the whole Pacific Ocean with a fork. Because it would be so slow. And it's the same problem with describing things with words. They're so clumsy. But with our brains, we can comprehend all kinds of situations instantly that would take us forever to manage with words. Now we do this day in and day out, and yet, although each one of us is an absolute miracle of organization and harmonious relationship to the external world, the self which we are aware of with conscious attention, the existence we are aware of with conscious attention, is simply a tiny fragment of what we really are. And insofar as we believe that much of our lives of which we are conscious is ourselves, we are very much impoverished. So then, believing that we are just this isolated center of conscious attention and volition, we are really rather angry with our environment. We feel we've got to control it and that it's alien. We don't recognize, as biologists know in theory, as physicists, as ecologists all know in theory, that the living organism of any human or animal or insect is inseparable from its environment. When you describe with scientific accuracy what any living organism is doing, you can take but a few steps in describing this behavior, and you will soon be describing also the behavior of the environment. You cannot describe a person walking without describing the space in which he walks, because if you don't describe that, you merely describe someone dangling his legs in empty space. You can't be aware of any organism or of anything without at the same time being aware of its background. You can't have a solid without a surrounding space. But we forget that space is not just nothing. It goes with solids, just as backs go with fronts and ups go with downs and crests of waves go with troughs of waves. The environment goes with the organism. It's all one process, but we forget it. We're unconscious of it because conscious attention screens out. In Gestalt theory of perception, we know very well that the enclosed figure captures attention and the background is ignored. Against some background that is relatively still, the moving figure captures attention and what is still is ignored. When our consciousness is stimulated, any stimulus that is constant and goes on and on and on becomes ignored. And we only recognize what changes. But insofar as we keep ignoring the other side of things, the space behind the solid, the environment behind the organism, we lose our sense of being one with and part of and an expression of the whole physical universe. That we go with it, that literally the external world is part of your own body. And to the extent that you overlook this, then our endeavors and our technology and our science are misused. And we are using these tremendous forces which human beings have not hitherto possessed to destroy our environment. And we are progressively making our world uninhabitable by our greed to overcome nature quickly, instead of cooperating with it, as if it were all an extension of ourselves. The most urgent thing, therefore, is for Western man and the Orientals who are trailing after him to wake up and come into a direct relationship with the physical world and stop being beguiled by abstractions. And this is one of the primary problems of education. That's why I like to talk about these things in academic context. Our education, as A.N. Whitehead pointed out long ago in Science in the Modern World, is completely one-sided. He said, you know, in the Garden of Eden, Adam saw the animals first and then named them. In the modern educational system, the child learns the names of the animals and never sees them. That is to say, we have an education which is excessively cerebral and verbal. It trains us to be bureaucrats, bankers, clerks, bookkeepers, word manipulators and number manipulators. But it entirely ignores our fundamental relationships to the physical universe. There are 5 great relationships of man to the physical universe. The farming and cultivation of the earth, cooking, clothing, housing, and lovemaking. And these are relatively ignored in a bourgeois education. Maybe if you're obviously not fit for college material, they'll give you a few high school courses in trades. But if you go through college, you're expected to be above mere material matters and to go into a profession and deal with ideas and be an absolute goon when it comes to physical existence. People who love things, who love material, make everything around them beautiful. Look at the average American city. The average California town sprawled along the freeways. All fronts and dirty shacks out back. The tract houses, all made of ticky-tacky and plasterboard, thrown together anyhow. All the identical pale blue swimming pools, utterly without imagination. All the fake cars that are just toy rocket ships and wretched transportation. All this is not made by people who love matter, but who hate it and resent its limitations and want to transform it as fast as possible into junk and poison gas. So we cannot relate to the material world unless we learn to love it, and we cannot love the material world unless we discover that it's one with ourselves. It's an extension of our own bodies, and what prevents us from realizing that is this fixation that the real me is this little ego, which we were taught to be when we were children. We were all given a part to play. And all our parents and our teachers and our aunts and uncles and our contemporaries told us who we were. And they gave us the certain prescribed roles which were acceptable. You can be a tough guy, you can be a clown, you can be a scholarly type. There's certain kind of types you can be, you know? You know what a regular guy is. It's a big act. But what's behind it? Well, the Hindus have another view. And we could learn a great deal from it. See, we have a theory of the world which is really an engineering theory. We look upon the world as an artifact, which was either made by the great artificer, God, or just happened, as in accordance with 19th century scientific philosophy, where the world is simply a fully automatic model. Before that, people thought it was made. You know, somebody actually made this machine. And therefore, there was some sort of heart to it. But this has always given us the feeling, you see, of being a bit outsiders. Yeah, God made you, but he made you out of nothing, and you better watch your P's and Q's. Well, when God disappeared, you were just nothing. You hadn't even been made. You were a freak and a fluke. But the Hindus had a different idea, which is not that the world is an artifact, but that it's a drama. It's a big act. And who's putting it on? Who do you suppose is putting it on? You say, what, me? Oh, I didn't do it. Oh, no. Take another think. How do you suppose the sun happens to be light? How do you suppose waves in the air happen to be noise? Why, you make it that way. Because you use your ears to turn waves in the air into noise. You use your eyes to turn whatever the sun is into light and heat. You wouldn't know there were any hard rocks unless you had soft skin. You wouldn't know there were any heavy rocks unless you had muscles. It's only in relation to you that the world is what it is. Won't you accept a little responsibility, after all? So the Hindus say that there is originally the self. The self, you! Only it's playing a game of hide and seek, because that is the fundamental game. All energy is vibration. And it goes on and it goes off. Because you don't know what on is unless you know what off is. You can't have a wave unless you have a crest of a wave and the trough of a wave. You can't have half a wave, which is a trough half or a crest half all by itself. Wave is crest troughing. And so everything in this world is going yoing, 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 yoing. Something's going very fast. This thing is going so fast I can't get my fist through it. Just in the same way when an airplane propeller revolves, 4 sticks become a disc, and you can't get your finger through it without damage. This is going much faster than an airplane propeller, and so I can't put my finger through it. But then other vibrations are much slower. The vibration of your breath, the vibration of your waking and sleeping, and beyond that, the vibration of your living and dying. And those are so slow that you don't realize they're vibrations. The pace is slowed down. And so it is that the fundamental game of the world is hide and seek game. It's very easy to understand. What would you do if you were God? Supposing, just suppose, you know everything, and you can do anything you like. What would you do? Let's suppose that as a result, to put the question in another way, of very, very advanced technological development, we've got a push-button system for instant wish fulfillment. Anything you like, press the button and it's there. That's the way we're going. That's our intention in creating technology. What will you do? Why? When you get that, you're going to have a great long think. And then you're going to say, what I really want is a button labeled surprise. Will somebody please put out a button labeled surprise? Because that's the whole point. If you know what is going to happen, if the future is totally under your control, the future is already the past. You've had it. That's why when we play games and the outcome of the game becomes certain, as in playing chess, we cancel the game and begin again. The whole fun of a game is that the outcome is not certain. So the universe keeps inventing for itself uncertain situations. It tries to see how far out it can get. Just as you would, if you had the power any night that you went to sleep to dream any dream you wanted to dream. And mind you, you could put 75 years of subconscious experience into a single night. And so first of all, you would dream all the excitements and all the wish fulfillments that you had ever wanted. You would have orgies and delights and fantastic journeys and wonderful travels. And you would do that for about a month of 75 years a night. And you say, isn't this getting a little boring? Let's get into danger. Let's have a wild adventure. Let's rescue princesses from dragons. Let's sometimes even forget we're dreaming and think all this is really real. And then we could dare ourselves, like kids dare themselves to do dangerous things. And tonight, I'm going to get involved in a real sticky situation because it'll be so nice when I wake up. And one of those nights in the course of your many dreams, you're going to dream that you're sitting in the auditorium at Monterey Peninsula College listening to me talking with all your troubles and all your difficulties and all your personal involvements. And this will be your dream for tonight. You don't know you're dreaming anymore because that's all part of the game. Now you can criticize this sort of theory any way you like. But I will challenge you to invent a better one. You can say life really isn't that good. It's really tragic. We're all wretched little beings involved in this ghastly system, and the thing about life is to put up a brave front to it all. Okay, be masochists. But deep down in your heart of hearts, in the form of what the Germans call a Hintergedanke, which is a thought way, way, way in the back of your head, you jolly well know who you are. Only nobody must admit it. It would be bad form. It would give the show away. Because you see, the thing is a dramatic performance. And when you go to the theater, you go to be fooled. You know very well that what is going on in the stage isn't for real. And yet you are going to allow the actor to convince you that it is. So the great actor, although he is protected by the proscenium arch, which tells you everything behind this arch is only in play, will with his great skill persuade you that it's almost real, and he'll have you sitting on the edge of your chairs. He'll have you weeping. He'll have you with thumping hearts and jumping when the bogey hits. You're almost persuaded. Now imagine the greatest actor of all, the big rascal behind the whole thing, which is you, putting on the show, taking yourself in completely. And you fooled yourself beautifully, thinking it's for real. This, or the awful awfuls, the great thrill, you see? And what a convincing performance is put on. It's all really fine because there's no victim in it. Nobody's being cruel to anyone. It's all you doing it to yourself. And in each case, everybody is the it which does it to himself. And it gets very far out. It gets into napalmed children and screaming mimes. But I can only say, think of a better answer. So, there comes a time in the development of this drama to wake up and know it's a play. Because you see, there are limits to everything. And when a game or a play becomes too serious, people stop being good sports. If, for example, you're playing poker for money, the higher the stakes, the less of a gentleman you become. When it's only for chips, then you're very well behaved because you know it's only a game. And now we're all involved in this game, and we've got real dangerous stakes. Nuclear energy, things like that. It's time everybody recognized it was a game. Of course, we could blow the whole thing up. We could turn the Earth into a star. Maybe that's how all stars have started. They were once upon a time planets with high civilizations, which discovered nuclear energy. And so they all became stars. And they acted as fires to warm little planets, which will in turn become stars. But you see, if you realize that that might be the case, and that the blowing up of life, that is to say, death, is simply what you've been through again and again. After all, here you are now. You don't remember having lived before. Neither will you next time, because it would be boring if you did. But you see, everybody is I. All people know that they're the center of the universe. And it's not only with human beings. Mosquitoes know it. And they think they're people. We look at mosquitoes and we say, oh, they're just mosquitoes, they're all the same. Besides, they have 6 legs and so on. And they look at us and say they're all the same. Besides, they only have 2 legs. But they are ladies and gentlemen. They have culture. A certain mosquito has a certain way of flipping its wing that is quite unique, and everybody sits around and admires and says, crazy. Because from the inner point of view, you see, you're all, each instance of this is the divine. It's from this Hindu point of view, it's the same fundamental self looking out through all eyes, but playing the game that it isn't it. Jesus put it in a funny way when he said, let not your left hand know what your right hand doeth. So let not your ego know what your self does. And pretend so that you can always say, well, I didn't do it, it was it that did it. And the answer is, ha ha. So you see, when you see that, and you have no further panic about survival, because you've always been around, and you always will be. Nature abhors a vacuum. I mean, if you imagine that death is going to sleep forever, think about that for a while. And you realize that before you were born, you went to sleep. I mean, you woke up without ever having gone to sleep. See, all eyes are the I, the self. So if you see that, then you won't get into this awful panic to survive. Because you see, it's the panic to survive that is going to move someone to press that awful red button that puts the bomb on, or sets the bomb off. The person who blows up this planet will do so in the cause of survival and peace, knowing that it's the best thing for us all, and he's fulfilling his duty and so on. Because of the panic to survive, we will destroy ourselves. Oppenheimer put it very well shortly before he died. He said, it is obvious that the whole human race is headed straight for hell. The only possible chance that this might not happen would be that we don't try to prevent it. Because you see, when you try to prevent it, you get the same kind of syndrome of a person who's looking over a precipice. And the more he looks, the more fascinated he is with the thought of falling. And eventually can't help it. And all the things done for safety merely emphasize the idea that it might happen. And so it's like when you get on an airplane and they have all these things that are meant to reassure you. And safety instructions, it makes everybody nervous. They didn't say anything about it. Nobody would think about it. So I remember particularly before the Second World War, in Japan, there were shown everywhere the most horrendous movies taken during the First World War. We had some inhibitions in the West about showing these things, but in Japan they showed all the guts and the murder and the filth and everything. That didn't frighten anyone off starting another war. It rather fascinated them with it. Because if something can be awful, well, let's get it as awful as it can get and get it over with. There's that honor in us. But if, on the other hand, we wake up a little, and instead of beating around the bush and pretending, find ourselves out, unmask ourselves from our pose of personality and being so different, and discover that we, each one of us, is responsible for all this. And we don't blame our parents anymore and say, you got me into this. We don't blame the government anymore. Say, you got me into this. Put a sticker on your car which says, I am the government. And be responsible. Well, I suggest that what we do now is that we have a brief intermission of about 3 minutes, in which those of you who have to leave can leave, others can stretch and relieve themselves from these funny human perches we all need, and then we can have questions. Okay? I will do my best to recognize waving hands. Yes?
What are some of the ways a person can find out who he is?
Why do you want to know?
We didn't get a question.
The question is, what are some of the ways in which a person can find out who he is? And I why do you want to know? Because if you think there's some problem about it, you're creating the problem because you're hiding from yourself who you are. And you can put off finding out by the most ingenious methods. You can take up religion. You can go in for all kinds of complicated meditation systems, wherein someone will tell you that it's going to take you a real long time to find out. Because all he's doing is testing you out, see whether you've got the nerve. And as long as he can fool you, you haven't. Or all sorts of things can be used as a way of putting it off, postponing finding out. That's all right. It's you're doing it. It's your game. It isn't time for you to wake up yet. But be very careful of all people who offer you a solution and say, I have the medicine. Be very careful. So if I were to give you a method, it would be so easy. I could create an enormous movement, make millions of dollars out of it by giving everybody the right method, but I would be like somebody stealing your watches and selling them to you. So I won't do it. I don't know, I'd be a gas if I did, but I just somehow don't feel like it. So, of course, there are such things as various forms of meditation, but they're all fundamentally very simple things. Meditation is the art of suspending thought temporarily. Look, it's as easy as ABC. If I talk all the time, I don't hear what anybody else has to say. So I will have nothing to talk about except my own talk, which after a while will be exhausted. So in the same way, if I think all the time, I won't have anything to think about except thoughts. So in order to have something to think about, I must occasionally stop thinking and experience directly. Thinking means, in this sense, talking to oneself, forming words and classifications about everything you experience. Well, don't do it. Stop it for a while. Don't say I, thou, or I, it, self, other. Stop it. And you will find then that you're living in a universe which is undivided. It's thought that divides everything into things, because things are the result of thinking. Things are units of thought, in the same way that inches are units of measurement. There are no things in nature, because nature is a great, big, wiggly Rorschach blot. And you can divide it any way you think it. So when you stop thinking, you come in contact again with the non-verbal world. And you experience the non-verbal world, in which there is no difference between the experiencer and the experience, because those are conceptual divisions. And when you stop concepts, there isn't that division left. It's all together in its original undivided state. And that's meditation. I don't think you need to set up a kind of organization to do that, do you? And make a big thing of it. There are all sorts of gimmicks which can help you do that, like concentrating on a sound instead of on a thought. That helps, but you eventually have to get rid of that. You can't go about buzzing to yourself all the time. But you see, the thing that we don't understand is that the moment anybody talks about stopping thinking, they think he's an anti-intellectual. The contrary is the case. I happen to be enormously interested in the art of cooking, but I certainly don't think one should be eating all the time. So in the same way, if I'm an intellectual, and I am, and I thoroughly believe in the academic life and in the pursuit of the things of the mind, but you can't do it unless you know how to shut up, how to stop thinking. And that's what our education does not provide for. It doesn't provide for any silence. There are no intervals between the thoughts. And as the yogis have said for centuries, liberation lies in the interval between two thoughts. We don't allow any interval. You have to think all the time. There's IBM people put a little thing, think, up in the office. You know? Yes, I see an arm up on the aisle.
Feel that I am the government. It seems that feeling brings me to a division from leads the infant ego into a mass-centered existence, and it brings responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It seems contrary to what you're saying.
Well, when you say I am the government, obviously the I here is not the ego. That is to say, is not the center of conscious attention and voluntary musculature. Let's take your breathing. You can feel the sensation of breathing both as being something you do and also as something that happens to you. And that's why breathing forms such an important part of meditation exercises. Because through becoming fully aware of breathing, we realize that voluntary actions are involuntary and involuntary actions are voluntary. We overcome the dualism between the two. But the moment you understand that, your center of gravity shifts to a deeper center than that of your ego. It's a very curious sensation when you get into this. Let me try and describe it. Let's suppose that you feel that everything that you do is simply happening to you, that you are as helplessly responsive to the movements of life and of your environment as if you were a cork on a stream. That's the feeling of complete irresponsibility, of being fated. The opposite feeling is the feeling that you are in charge of everything. And this often happens in kinds of psychotic megalomania, where a person is absolutely convinced that everything going on around them, the wind blowing, the clouds floating, and people moving, is their own action. And in a way, of course, it's true, because everything you experience is a transformation or process going on in your own nervous system. We aren't ordinarily aware of that. We aren't ordinarily aware that what we see in front of us is how it feels inside one's head. What you're looking at is a sensation in the back of your brain where the optical nerve centers are. There's no color out there, any more than the sound when a hand hits a skinless drum. So both points of view are true. It does you, and you do it. Now, how do you put those two apparently opposite points of view together? Why, they are two ways of looking at one's... Because you think when you suddenly feel that you're one with the whole process, you say, now who's the decision up to? Do you know that sensation when you're talking in a microphone, and after a second or two delay, you hear your own voice come back to you? And then you start stopping to wait for it to go on. It's a feeling very like that. And so you just realize that you just go on. And it works out all right. But at first it's very disconcerting because you wonder who's responsible. Who does start it? Where does it come from? Does it do me or do I do it? The truth of the matter is neither, and both. If you want to hold your hand up, hold it up. So, yeah, here's one. Yes. What drugs? Now, you've got to watch your language. The question is, what do I feel about hallucinogenic drugs? If you're asking about psychedelic drugs, I wouldn't use the word hallucinogenic. We are under a hallucination right now, most of us. Although, of course, there are hallucinogenic drugs. But I would say that a hallucination is a state of consciousness in which one confuses some sort of vision with what is going on in the world of public reality. If I thought I saw a ghost, or if I thought I saw my deceased mother walking up this aisle, and I only could see this and nobody else could notice it, I would say it was a hallucination. And especially if I really was convinced that she was here. But when you use psychedelic chemicals, you don't get into that sort of state, because you know that what you see is the consequence of having taken the chemical, and you therefore don't confuse it with public reality. Now, since this is a sort of leading question about these things, I may as well say something about it, because this is a critical issue in our culture today. We must realize first that the culture of the United States is extremely insecure, and it has a very low tolerance for eccentricity. We're so nervous about whether we really are right that we don't really want to listen to any criticism or to any different point of view. All secure civilizations have a high tolerance for eccentricity. And they just say, oh, if you want to criticize us, go ahead. You know, say anything you like, it won't make any difference. So you want to grow beards. So you want to run around wearing long clothes and beads. Okay, have your kicks. But we think, oh, what is youth coming to? And secure civilizations have always realized that you cannot legislate morality. Morality is by definition free. And we are under the fantastic illusion that we can make people moral by passing laws to be enforced by the police. And we don't realize that this is an unconstitutional violation of the separation of church and state. It is turning our policemen into being armed preachers. And this is the main cause of the corruption of the police and the disrespect in which the police are held. They have a very difficult job to do, fulfilling their essential functions of directing traffic, protecting the citizenry from robbery and murder, and giving due assistance to little old ladies and lost children. The police should be entirely excluded from the domain of private morals. And then things would be a lot better for this country, and the police would be respected. I have only to ask you the question. It needs no answer. What kind of person would it take to volunteer for service in a vice squad? Think it over. But you see, in this situation where we have problems with people doing dangerous things with drugs, they are very dangerous things indeed. LSD is a very dangerous chemical because it's dangerous to explore inner space, and perhaps more dangerous than to explore outer space. But young people have always been interested in dangerous challenges. Do those astronauts leave Cape Kennedy for kicks? I guess so. Oh, they call it advancement of science and human mastery of outer space. So in the same way, young people who explore inner space are quite sincere in their wish to find out what on earth we are on the inside. And this is one of the ways of exploring. And it's a dangerous way because you might get lost. Some people do get lost. But instead of trying to sweep the whole thing under the carpet and pretend it isn't going on, and that if it is, it should stop, what these courageous young people need to be given is not police supervision, but the most expert help imaginable. There should be clinics in every university where instead of being forced to get fifth-rate bathtub LSD, which has been freaked out with amphetamines or something, to get properly controlled chemicals under properly controlled circumstances and make these explorations in an intelligent way. In other words, we've got to face up to these realities. They are going to go on whether anybody likes it or not. And so if they're going to go on, bring it all out into the open and do it expertly instead of a botched job in private. I regard, in other words, the mind-altering chemicals as instruments, just in the same way as you use a lens in a microscope or in a telescope to alter the perception of the eye. So you can use certain kinds of chemical lenses to alter the general perception of the mind. And if you know what you're doing, it's all right. Now, if you are anybody, you can have a ball with a telescope. But if you have astronomical knowledge, it becomes a very useful instrument to you. Anybody can have kicks off pot or LSD, but if you happen to be interested in and have technical knowledge about the workings of the mind, it becomes a very valuable instrument to you. The difficulty is that the administration of these chemicals is beyond the competence of the single professions. That is to say, very few psychiatrists are qualified to administer LSD simply by virtue of psychiatric training. What is needed is a multiple team where you've got psychiatry, neurology, pharmacology, religion, expertise in meditation, mythology, and anthropology. All these skills are needed. And there is no single individual, or at least very rarely, who is qualified in all these fields. But those are the sort of qualifications you need to work with these things. So it has to be done by a team. So here it is, and it's here to stay, and there's no way of getting rid of it. The more people preach against it, the more people are going to do it for kicks, because, wowee, here's a danger. And you are not going to get rid of it by any kind of police action or legislation whatsoever. It's going to be much worse than prohibition, because it's much more interesting than getting drunk. Yes. Yes, I'm talking to a lady in black, yes.
University proper surrounding nature.
Oh, of course. I mean, I'm not saying that when I say a university is a proper surrounding that it should be ivy-covered halls. A university is perfectly able to have within its precincts very beautiful gardens and proper surroundings for this kind of thing. The surroundings you're in make all the difference in the world to the experience, because if you're in a hospital, people generally feel that hospitals are rather threatening, and therefore they have terrible times, surrounded by, you know, those enameled, scrubbed walls and people in white uniforms and stethoscopes and clipboards and test tubes, you know, they feel, So the natural surroundings are obviously better. Yes, sir. Gentleman in a khaki shirt sitting second in from the aisle in the fourth row.
Once someone has awakened from this sleep-like dream world and come to the realization of the drama which we all are part of.
Yes.
Could it or might it be sort of hard for him to live with and cope with all the rest of the people who are still in the sleep-like world, playing the drama and do not realize it's playing?
The question is this: if somebody awakes from the sleep-like drama and realizes he is one with the eternal energy behind the whole scene, isn't he going to have difficulties coping with the people who are still under the illusion? No. It's going to be much easier for him. Because instead of disrespecting them, like he would if he was still under the illusion, and say, "You're just dumb," he says, "How magnificently asleep you are." So, then if you're very far out, you know, in the ordinary sense we say a far out person, you will look at squares with admiration and say, "They're the real far out people. They're so far out they don't even know where they got started from." And every square who thinks life is terribly serious is the Godhead, immersed in the depths of his adventure, so that he's quite lost, which is the whole thing that gives the adventure spice. And therefore you say, "Bravo, how great it is that you've got so far out." See? And it makes it much easier. You don't have to go around angry with people. Yes, sir.
When you define a hallucinogenic drug, I believe that you said that your deceased mother came down the aisle and you were the only one that saw her, that her appearance was not public reality. And you realized, you believe, that seeing her would not be effective in drug, but wasn't actually public reality. The drug would be a hallucination.
That would be, no, I didn't say the drug would be. I said that would be my definition of a hallucination.
I would like to ask you, then, does LSD give us an insight into reality or create it? I would like to consider this kind of the phenomenon that some people, after taking LSD, occasionally see their person separated from their body and actually believe this is reality and experience a panic reaction.
To sum up this question, it has to do with, this question has to do with cases of people who have taken such psychedelics as LSD and have had experiences which they interpret as in a way that would indicate that they have foreknowledge of something or special knowledge outside the ordinary channels. Now, I have known many such cases of people who, for example, thought that they had foreknowledge of the future of a very high order of certainty, and they banked on it, and it didn't work out, and they had a terrific letdown. Now, the reason is this. When you enter into unfamiliar territory, you tend to try to understand it in terms of what you already know. That is to say, you project, you extrapolate. Is the thinking, I, the ego, am God. And this is the besetting danger of mystics. Now, when we get people who say they're God, we put them in the insane asylum, because we think that this is tantamount to claiming to being personally in charge of the universe, the big boss. But in Indian society, when somebody says he's God, everybody takes it as a matter of course. They say, of course you're God, and I'm so glad you found out at last. Because you see, to make the point, their image of God is not based on a political model. The Western Judeo-Christian image of God is based on politics. It is an image based on the kings of the ancient Near East. And the title King of Kings and Lord of Lords was borrowed, entire, from the kings of the Persian Empire, the Cyruses. Kyrie eleison. Cyrus, have mercy on us. And so the images of the pharaohs, of the Hammurabis, and so on, became the image of the ruler of the universe. Now in India, they don't have a political image of God. They have an organic image. The cosmic centipede, working all those legs. And that's why their gods have many arms. And they don't have to think how to do it. Just like you don't have to think how to grow your hair. So when you say, in the West I am God, that is saying I'm top dog. But if you say Tattvamasi, that art thou, you're it. It's perfectly acceptable for the Hindu. Now I ask you, how can you, Americans, citizens of the United States, swearing allegiance to a republic as the best form of government, how can you believe the universe is a monarchy? Because if heaven is a monarchy, that's the best form of government, and you'd better adopt it. But there's complete confusion of our laws and our social institutions because of this conflict. We are terrified that there might be, we're terrified of mysticism, and of course anything that might produce a mystical experience, especially something that does it easily, like a chemical, because it might introduce a revolution and institute democracy in the kingdom of heaven. That would never do. That would be insubordination. Unless, of course, you believe in an organic as distinct from a political kingdom of heaven. And that's much more suitable to our form of government and our general outlook on life, where no healthy American really respects authority. We're always a little ornery and individualistic. And we say, all right, we'll respect authority when authority becomes respectable. But not before. And that's a good, healthy thing, you know. That's what makes somebody more than a goody-goody. Do you want a child that's just a plastic imitation of yourself? Does everything you tell him to do? Respects your authority until he's just a puppet? Such a thing. Yes, sir.
Why do you think that our desire to experiment with the psychedelic drugs declines as we grow older?
I don't know that it does. The question is, why does our desire to experiment with things like psychedelic drugs decline as we grow older? Boy, I know a lot of old people who it's rare to get in there. When Aldous Huxley started, he was, I think he was over 60. So was Gerald Hurd, yes. They were the old boys who started this whole thing. And, but I'll tell you one thing that does happen. I've seen this again and again, is that people who do work with them eventually say that's enough. I've seen it. Because these things are not diets, they are medicine. And don't get hooked on the medicine. It's like going through a door. A door lets you into another room, but don't turn it into a revolving door and go spinning on it. And people who are what they call acid heads, who practically live on something like this, have missed the point. They're like the Buddha said of his own doctrine, it is a raft, and it is for crossing the stream, and when you get to the other side, you don't carry the raft along with you, you leave it. But there are always people who get hooked on religion, or who get hooked on something, and they stay with it. So, you know what we call the kind of person we used to call a religious maniac, who was kind of a human church mouse, and always sort of obsessed with bondieuserie, as the French call it, you know. That's addiction to religion. Now, the difference between a doctor and a clergyman is that the doctor is trying to get rid of his patients, and a clergyman is trying to hook them on the medicine. Because he wants them to join the church, stay around, make their pledge, and be faithful attendants every Sunday. See, now that's permanent hospitalization.